Colorado Territory, 1873. The harsh winter winds howled across the foothills of the Rocky Mountains, whipping snow against the windows of a solitary cabin nestled among towering pines. Inside, Weston stared at the letter in his hands, the doctor's words blurring before his eyes. Regret to inform you, examination conclusive, sterility likely permanent from the fever. Prospects of fathering children extremely unlikely. At 26, Finn crumpled the paper and tossed it into the crackling fire. He watched the edges blacken and curl, much like the dream of a family he had quietly harbored since claiming this mountain homestead 3 years ago. The flames reflected in his clear blue eyes, which stood out starkly against his sun-bronzed skin. Despite his youth and the strong, lean build forged by years of frontier work, the doctor's verdict made him feel hollow. What use was his 200 acres, the growing herd of cattle, the carefully built cabin, if there would never be a son to pass it to? What man was he if he could never sire children? The mountain men he had grown up admiring all had sons following in their footsteps. They had legacies. Finn ran a hand through his sandy brown hair, still damp from his monthly trip to town for supplies. The trip that had included his first visit to Doc Simmons after weeks of putting it off. The trip that confirmed what he had feared since recovering from the typhoid that had nearly killed him last spring. He poured himself 3 fingers of whiskey and gazed out the window at the vast wilderness that surrounded his homestead. This was why he had come west after the war, to build something that was his alone, something that would outlast him. But what was the point of building a legacy with no one to leave it to? Just you and me now, he murmured to the dog curled by the fire. The aging shepherd raised his head at the sound of his master's voice. Forever, I reckon. The doctor's letter only confirmed what Finn had already suspected. The frontier was a place for lonely men, not families. Not for him anyway. He'd been a fool to think otherwise. As the fire died down, Finn made a decision. He would focus on what he could control, building the finest ranch in the territory. He would become known for his cattle, his horses. If he couldn't have sons, he would have respect. It was enough. It had to be. The following spring arrived with unusual intensity, melting mountain snow faster than anyone had seen in years. The rushing waters swelled creeks into rivers and rivers into raging torrents. Finn had spent the morning reinforcing the banks near his best grazing land, shoulders aching from moving boulders to divert the water flow. He was leading his horse along the muddy trail back to his cabin when he heard it, a scream that pierced through the constant rush of water. Finn froze, scanning the landscape until he spotted movement downriver, where the waters churned violently around a fallen tree that stretched halfway across the surging current. There, clinging precariously to branches, was a woman. Without hesitation, Finn spurred his horse along the riverbank, calculating distances and possibilities. The woman's skirts were sodden, dragging her down, but she had managed to pull herself partly onto the tree trunk. Even from a distance, he could see her trembling with effort. "Hold on," he shouted, though the roaring water likely carried his words away. He tied his horse to a nearby sapling and grabbed the rope from his saddle. Finn worked quickly, fashioning a crude harness around his chest and securing the other end to a sturdy tree. The woman's pale face turned toward him, her eyes wide with terror. Her dark hair had come loose from its pins, streaming wet down her back. "I'm coming for you," he called out. "Just hold tight." The frigid water hit him like a blow as he waded in, the current immediately threatening to sweep his feet from under him. Finn fought against it, using the fallen tree for support as he made his way toward her. The woman's knuckles were white where they gripped the rough bark, her arms shaking with exhaustion. When he finally reached her, he was shocked by her youth. She couldn't be more than 20, with delicate features now tight with fear. "I've got you," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. "I need to get this rope around you." "The wagon," she gasped through chattering teeth. "It overturned my father." "First things first," Finn interrupted, looping the rope carefully around her waist. "Let's get you to shore." The journey back was a brutal fight against the current, but eventually they collapsed onto the muddy bank, both gasping for breath. The woman was shivering violently, her blue dress plastered to her slender frame. "My father," she repeated, struggling to sit up. "He was driving, the bridge gave way." Finn scanned the river downstream, seeing nothing but churning waters. "When did this happen?" "Just before I screamed, the wagon. It went under almost immediately." Finn helped her to her feet. "I need to look for him. Can you walk?" She nodded, though her legs trembled beneath her. "I'll help you search." "Miss, you're half frozen. My cabin's just up that rise." "Get yourself there and start a fire." No, she said firmly, wiping wet strands of dark hair from her face. He's my father. Something in her determined expression, the flash of steel behind the fear, made Finn nod reluctantly. They searched for nearly 2 hours, following the river downstream, calling out into the gathering dusk. They found pieces of the wagon, a trunk of clothing, a shattered wooden chest, but no sign of her father. As darkness fell and the temperature dropped, Finn finally insisted they return to his cabin. The woman, Lily Vance, she had told him during their search, was swaying on her feet, her lips tinged blue with cold. "We'll resume at first light," he promised, "but you'll be no help to your father if you die of exposure." His cabin, usually so solitary and quiet, felt strangely transformed with another person inside it. Finn built up the fire while Lily stood dripping on the plank floor, her arms wrapped around herself. "I need to get you dry clothes," he said awkwardly, suddenly aware of the impropriety of their situation. "I don't have anything suitable, but—" "Anything dry will do," she said softly. Finn found his smallest shirt and a pair of trousers, then turned his back while she changed behind the privacy screen he hastily created with a blanket hung from the ceiling. When she emerged, the clothes engulfed her slender frame, but the shivering had subsided. "Thank you, Mr. Weston," she said, settling into the chair he offered by the fire. "For saving my life." Finn busied himself making coffee, uncomfortable with gratitude. Anyone would have done the same. "No," Lily said, her voice stronger now, "they wouldn't have. Certainly not with such skill." She paused, watching him as he worked. "You've lived out here long." 3 years on my own, worked another man's ranch for 2 before that. And before that. Finn hesitated, memories of cannon fire and screaming men flashing through his mind. "The war." She nodded, not pressing further. Instead, she accepted the tin cup of coffee he offered, wrapping her slender fingers around it for warmth. In the firelight, Finn noticed her eyes were an unusual shade of green, like spring leaves when the sun shines through them. "I should tell you about our journey," she said after a moment. "My father and I were traveling to Silver Creek. We have family there, my aunt. My mother passed 2 winters ago, and father thought we might make a fresh start." "Silver Creek's a good town," Finn said. "Growing fast with the new silver strikes." "Yes, that's what father said. He was to take a position as accountant at the mercantile bank." Her voice wavered slightly. "He must have survived. He's a strong swimmer." Finn didn't reply. The river had been wild, the water frigid. Even strong swimmers would struggle. "We'll search again tomorrow," he said instead. "First light." Lily nodded, the fatigue of the day suddenly evident in the droop of her shoulders. "I don't know how to thank you." "No need." Finn moved to the small trunk at the foot of his bed and pulled out extra blankets. "You take the bed. I'll sleep by the fire." "I couldn't possibly. You've been through an ordeal, Miss Vance." "And I was raised right despite appearances." He offered a small smile. "My mother would haunt me if I let a lady sleep on the floor." For the first time, Lily's solemn face brightened with a faint smile. "Then I shall thank your mother for raising such a gentleman." That night, as Finn lay on his bedroll by the dying embers, he listened to the steady breathing of the woman in his bed. Her presence had transformed his cabin from a place of solitude to something else entirely, something he couldn't quite name. It unsettled him, and yet, in the strangest way, it also felt right. He told himself it was simple human decency, helping someone in need, nothing more. Come morning, they would search for her father. If they found him alive, Finn would help them both to Silver Creek. If not, well, he would get her safely to her aunt. Either way, Lily Vance would soon be out of his life and things would return to normal. This strange feeling in his chest, this awareness of another person breathing the same air, sharing the same space, was temporary. And that was for the best. After all, what could he possibly offer a woman like her? A sterile mountain man with nothing but a small ranch and a lifetime of solitude ahead of him. Dawn broke cold and clear, the spring sun doing little to warm the air as Finn and Lily resumed their search along the swollen river. They moved methodically downstream, scanning both banks and the debris-filled water for any sign of Horace Vance. As morning stretched toward afternoon, the hope in Lily's eyes began to dim. They had covered nearly 5 miles of riverbank without finding a trace of her father. The scattered remnants of their wagon and belongings continued to appear, a saddle, pages of a ledger book, a woman's bonnet that made Lily's breath catch, but no sign of the man himself. He might have pulled himself out further downstream, Finn offered, though his experience told him otherwise. The river was too cold, too violent. If Horace Vance had survived the initial plunge, exposure would have claimed him within hours. Lily nodded, but her face showed she had begun to accept the truth. He would have found a way to signal us if he could, she said quietly. Father was always resourceful. The sun was lowering toward the western peaks when they finally turned back. They walked in silence, the weight of unspoken grief hanging between them. Finn found himself watching Lily from the corner of his eye, admiring the straight set of her shoulders despite everything. "I'm sorry," he said finally, the inadequate words tasting bitter on his tongue. "I knew when the bridge collapsed," she replied after a long moment. "I knew, even as I was fighting for my own life. I just couldn't accept it." A single tear traced down her cheek, quickly brushed away. "Now I have no choice." Back at the cabin, Finn busied himself with practical matters, stoking the fire, preparing a simple meal of beans and salt pork, tending to his horses. It gave Lily space to sit quietly by the window, her thoughts clearly far away. "I should get you to Silver Creek tomorrow," he said as they ate. "Your aunt will be worried when you don't arrive as expected." Lily looked up, her fork pausing halfway to her mouth. "She doesn't actually expect us. Father sent a letter, but we were traveling ahead of it." She set her fork down. "Mr. Weston, I don't even know if she'll take me in." Father was her brother, but they had been estranged for years. We were hoping to reconcile. Surely she wouldn't turn away her own niece. "I don't know," Lily admitted. "I've never met her." Finn frowned. The situation was more complicated than he'd realized. A young, unmarried woman couldn't simply arrive in a frontier town alone with no confirmed place to stay. Reputation was everything, and Lily's would be compromised before she even had a chance to establish herself. "Well," he said slowly, "there's no rush. You can stay here until we sort things out. Send a letter to your aunt, explain the circumstances." "I couldn't impose." "It's not an imposition, I have the space." He gestured around the cabin. "It's not much, but you're welcome to stay while we figure out your next steps." Lily studied him, her green eyes searching his face. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" The question caught Finn off guard. Why indeed? He had spent 3 years carefully building a life of solitude, convinced it was what he wanted, what he needed. And yet here he was, opening his home to a woman he barely knew. "Because it's the right thing to do," he said finally. "And out here we look after those in need. It's how we survive." She nodded slowly, accepting his answer, though her eyes suggested she sensed there was more to it. "Thank you, then. I promise I won't stay any longer than necessary." That night, as Finn again made his bed by the fire, he found himself unsettled by the ease with which he had invited Lily to stay. It wasn't like him to act on impulse, especially not when it came to sharing his carefully constructed solitude. Yet something about her, her quiet strength, her dignity in the face of loss, had touched something in him he'd thought long buried. Perhaps it was simply that her presence made the cabin feel less empty. Or perhaps it was the way she had thanked him for the simple meal as though he'd served her a feast, or how the firelight had caught in her dark hair as she'd helped him wash the dishes. Whatever it was, Finn told himself it was temporary. He would help her connect with her aunt, ensure she had a proper place to go, and then return to his life as it was meant to be. Alone, with no false hopes or dreams to torment him. Yet as he drifted toward sleep, the sound of Lily's quiet breathing from across the room followed him into his dreams, and for the first time in months, those dreams were not of battlefield horrors or empty futures, but of something he couldn't quite define, something that felt strangely like possibility. The days that followed fell into an unexpected rhythm. Each morning, Finn would rise before dawn and complete his chores while Lily slept. When she woke, they would share a simple breakfast before he headed out to tend to his small herd of cattle or work on the endless tasks a mountain homestead required. Lily, unwilling to be idle, took over the cabin's interior. She swept and scrubbed, organized Finn's haphazard collection of supplies, and somehow managed to make bread in his temperamental wood stove, a skill he had never mastered. On the third day, they rode together to the nearest trading post, 15 miles east. Finn needed supplies, and Lily needed to send a letter to her aunt in Silver Creek, explaining what had happened and inquiring about coming to stay. The trading post was a rough-hewn log structure run by a grizzled old-timer named Hobson, whose missing eye and extensive vocabulary of curses hinted at a colorful past. His weathered face registered surprise at the sight of Finn with a woman. "Well, I'll be," Hobson said, leaning across his counter. "Finn Weston with company, never thought I'd see the day." Finn's expression remained impassive. "Miss Vance needs to send a letter." Hobson's good eye shifted to Lily, who stood straight-backed in her still-damp blue dress, which Finn had helped retrieve from their searches downriver. Despite the garment's bedraggled condition, she carried herself with a natural dignity that made it seem insignificant. "Pleasure, ma'am," Hobson said, his tone softening slightly. "Got paper and pencil right here. The stage comes through tomorrow. They'll take your letter on to Silver Creek." While Lily composed her letter, Finn gathered the supplies they needed: flour, coffee, salt, ammunition, and a few yards of fabric he quietly added to his purchases. Hobson raised an eyebrow at the latter but said nothing as he calculated the total. As they prepared to leave, Lily carefully handed her sealed letter to Hobson. "How long might it take to reach Silver Creek, sir?" "Stage'll have it there in 3 days. Another few for a reply, depending on how quick your party sends one back." Lily nodded, her face composed though Finn could see the worry in her eyes. "Thank you." The ride back to the cabin was quiet, each lost in their own thoughts. The crisp spring air carried the scent of pine and new growth, and the mountains stood majestic against the deepening blue of the afternoon sky. Finn found himself watching Lily as she rode beside him, noting how naturally she sat in the saddle, a skill that spoke of a life not entirely confined to cities. "You ride well," he observed. A small smile touched her lips. "My mother insisted I learn. She was raised on a farm in Pennsylvania and believed every woman should know how to handle herself outdoors." The smile faltered. "Father preferred town life, but he indulged her. After she died, he struggled. That's partly why we were heading west, too many memories." Finn nodded, understanding all too well the need to escape memories. Wasn't that why he had come to this remote mountain valley after the war, to leave behind the blood and screams that haunted his dreams? "How old are you, Miss Vance?" he asked suddenly. She looked surprised by the question. 22 this past February, and please call me Lily. After all, I'm sleeping in your bed." Her cheeks colored as soon as the words left her mouth, and Finn felt an unexpected warmth spread through his chest. "Only while I'm not in it," he replied with a slight smile, surprising himself with the teasing response. Lily's blush deepened, but her eyes sparkled with something that hadn't been there before. "Mr. Weston, I do believe that's the first time I've seen you smile." "Finn," he corrected, "and I smile plenty, just usually when no one's looking." This drew a genuine laugh from her, the sound clear and bright in the mountain air. Something shifted between them in that moment, a tension easing, a bridge beginning to form. When they reached the cabin, Finn helped Lily down from her horse, his hands lingering slightly at her waist before he stepped back. "I got you something at the trading post," he said, suddenly awkward. "Nothing fancy, but I thought you might need it." From his saddlebag, he pulled out the fabric he'd purchased, several yards of serviceable brown cotton. "Thought you might want to make yourself something, since your trunk was lost in the river." Lily touched the fabric with reverent fingers. "This is very kind," she said softly. "I don't know how to repay." "No need," Finn interrupted. "Consider it part of frontier hospitality." That evening, as Lily began cutting the fabric using a paper pattern she'd created, Finn found himself watching her from across the room. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple bun, exposing the graceful curve of her neck as she bent over her work. Her movements were precise and confident, the scissors flashing in the lamplight. "You're skilled with a needle," he observed. Lily glanced up, a small smile playing at her lips. "Another of my mother's insisted upon skills." She believed a woman should be able to create beauty from necessity. Her expression turned wistful. She would have loved it out here, the wildness of it. "And you," Finn asked, "do you find it too wild?" Lily considered this, her hands stilling on the fabric. "I find it honest," she said finally. "The mountains don't pretend to be anything other than what they are: beautiful but dangerous, generous but demanding." Her green eyes met his. "I appreciate honesty above most things, even when the truth is harsh." "Especially then," she replied. "Comforting lies only postpone pain, they never prevent it." Finn found himself nodding, surprised by the wisdom in her words. Most women of his acquaintance, admittedly few, seemed to prefer pretty illusions to hard truths. But Lily Vance faced reality with a straightforward courage that matched his own approach to life. "What about you, Finn?" she asked, returning to her cutting. "What brought you to this particular mountain?" He hesitated, unaccustomed to sharing his history. Yet something about the quiet evening and Lily's unpretentious presence loosened his tongue. "After the war, I couldn't stomach going back east," he said slowly. Too crowded, too many reminders. I drifted west, worked ranches in Kansas and Nebraska before ending up in Colorado. Saved enough to stake my own claim. He gestured around the cabin. It's not much, but it's mine. No one telling me what to do, no one depending on me to keep them alive. No one to share it with either, Lily observed softly. Finn stiffened slightly. That's by choice. Is it, her gaze was steady, unaccusing, or is it by habit? The question struck uncomfortably close to truths Finn preferred not to examine. Some men aren't made for company, he said gruffly. And some just haven't found the right company yet, Lily countered, but she didn't press further. Instead, she held up the partially cut fabric. What do you think? Will this style suit a frontier woman? The change of subject was a relief, and Finn found himself studying the simple dress pattern with genuine interest. Looks practical. You'll want to be able to move freely if you're going to survive out here. Then I'll be sure to leave room for running from bears, she teased, and just like that, the moment of tension dissolved. As the evening wore on, Finn realized with surprise that he was enjoying himself. Conversation with Lily came easier than he would have expected, flowing naturally between serious topics and light-hearted observations. She had a quick mind and a quiet humor that drew him out of his habitual reserve. When they finally retired for the night, Finn to his bedroll and Lily to his bed, he found himself staring at the cabin ceiling, turning their conversation over in his mind. Lily's question haunted him. Was his solitude truly by choice or merely by habit? He had convinced himself that isolation was his preference, that the quiet simplicity of his existence was all he needed. Yet in just a few days, Lily's presence had awakened something in him he had thought long dead, the desire for connection. But what was the use in acknowledging such feelings? Even if Lily felt some similar stirring, and there was no evidence she did, what future could they possibly have? He was a man who could never father children, never provide the family that a woman like Lily deserved. His sterility was a wall between him and any such dreams, as impassable as the mountains themselves. No, Finn told himself firmly, better to help her reach her aunt, to see her settled properly, and then return to the life he had built. The life he was meant to have, alone. Yet even as he resolved this, he found himself listening to the soft sound of Lily's breathing across the room, and wondering what it would be like to hear that sound every night for the rest of his life. The days stretched into a week, and still no reply came from Silver Creek. Lily tried to hide her growing anxiety, but Finn could see it in the tightness around her eyes, in the way she would pause sometimes in the middle of a task, staring at nothing. Give it time, he assured her one evening as they sat on the cabin's small porch, watching the sunset paint the western peaks in gold and crimson. Could be your aunt was away when the letter arrived. Lily nodded, but her hands twisted restlessly in her lap. Or it could be she has no interest in taking in her brother's orphan daughter. Then she's a fool, Finn said with unexpected vehemence. Lily looked at him in surprise, her green eyes widening slightly before a slow smile spread across her face. Thank you for that. Embarrassed by his outburst, Finn cleared his throat. Just stating facts, you're hardworking, sensible, and... He hesitated, then finished gruffly, any household would be improved by your presence. The compliment hung in the air between them, sincere but awkward. Finn hadn't meant to be so forthright, yet he couldn't bring himself to regret the words when he saw how they had eased the worry from Lily's expression. Well, she said softly, until we hear otherwise, I'm grateful for your hospitality. She paused, then added, though I fear I've disrupted your routine terribly. Not terribly, Finn replied with a small smile. Just enough to keep things interesting. It was true, Lily's presence had changed his days in ways both subtle and profound. The cabin, once merely functional, now felt like a home. Meals, once a solitary chore, had become something to look forward to. Even his work seemed to have new purpose, as though the ranch were suddenly more than just his own refuge, it was a place worthy of sharing. During the day, they each attended to their separate tasks, Finn with his cattle and land, Lily with the domestic sphere she had claimed as her domain. But increasingly, they found ways to work together. Lily would help him in the vegetable garden he'd neglected for too long, or he would assist her in carrying water or chopping extra wood for her baking. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, talking of their pasts, their beliefs, their observations of the world around them. Finn found himself sharing stories he had never told anyone, about his childhood in Ohio, his experiences in the war, his dreams for the ranch. In turn, Lily spoke of her life in St. Louis, her mother's gentle wisdom, her father's struggles after becoming a widower. He was never the same after Mother died, she confided one night, her face solemn in the firelight. It was like part of him went with her. He functioned, he worked, he even smiled sometimes, but there was always something missing. She looked down at her hands. I wonder now if he knew somehow that they wouldn't be separated long. Finn thought of his own parents, his father dead from influenza when Finn was just 14, his mother following barely a year later. Some people can't survive the loss, he said quietly. It breaks something essential in them. And others, Lily asked, her eyes meeting his. What about them? Others endure, Finn replied. They carry on because they must. They build new lives from the ruins of the old. Like you did after the war. It wasn't a question, but Finn nodded anyway, like many of us did. Do you think, Lily began, then hesitated. Do you think those new lives can ever be as full as the ones that were lost, or are they always just substitutes? The question pierced Finn like an arrow, striking at doubts he rarely allowed himself to acknowledge. Was his existence here merely a pale substitute for the life he might have had if the war hadn't changed him? If the fever hadn't rendered him sterile, I think, he said slowly, that different doesn't have to mean less, just different. Lily considered this, the firelight playing across her features. In the 10 days since her arrival, the pallor of grief had faded from her cheeks, replaced by a healthy glow from time spent outdoors. The dress she had sewn fit her slender frame perfectly, the simple brown fabric somehow emphasizing the grace of her movements, the delicate curve of her neck. I think you're right, she said finally. Different can sometimes be more, can't it, more than we ever expected. Their eyes held for a long moment, and Finn felt something shift between them, a recognition, an acknowledgement of feelings neither had put into words. His heart hammered in his chest, and he found himself leaning slightly forward, drawn by some invisible force. The spell was broken by the sudden howl of a wolf in the distance, echoed by others across the valley. Finn sat back, both relieved and disappointed by the interruption. They're hunting tonight, he observed, his voice slightly rough. Lily nodded, her cheeks flushed, nature carrying on as it always has. As it always will, Finn agreed, rising to add another log to the fire, using the movement to put distance between them to regain his composure. Yet even as he retreated physically, Finn knew something had changed. The careful boundaries he had maintained were eroding, worn away by Lily's presence, by her quiet strength, by the way she had seamlessly woven herself into the fabric of his daily life. And most dangerous of all, he was beginning to imagine what it might be like if she never left, if the letter from her aunt never came, or if it contained a rejection. Would Lily consider staying? Could they build a life together, even knowing he could never give her children? The thoughts were foolish, born of loneliness and proximity. Finn tried to dismiss them, to remind himself of the harsh realities that made such dreams impossible. Yet as he lay awake that night, listening to Lily's steady breathing from across the room, those dreams persisted, taking root in the fertile soil of his heart like seeds that, once planted, refused to lie dormant. 2 weeks after Lily's arrival, a Chinook wind blew down from the mountains, bringing unseasonable warmth that melted the remaining snow and turned the creeks into rushing torrents once more. Finn spent the morning securing his livestock against the rising waters, returning to the cabin mud-splattered and weary. He found Lily at the table, staring at a letter. Her face was pale, her expression unreadable. It came, she said without looking up, from my aunt. Finn felt his heart sink. This was it, then, the moment that would determine Lily's future, and though he hardly dared admit it even to himself, perhaps his own as well. What does she say? He asked, removing his muddy boots before approaching. Lily looked up, her green eyes troubled. She says I may come, but, she paused, swallowing hard, but only as her housekeeper. She has no interest in playing mother to a grown woman, as she puts it. She offers room and board, no wages, and makes it clear this is charity, not family obligation. Finn felt a surge of indignation on Lily's behalf. That's not right. It's not ideal, Lily agreed quietly, but it's shelter and respectable employment of a sort, more than many orphaned women can claim. You deserve better, Finn said firmly. A sad smile touched Lily's lips, perhaps. But we don't always get what we deserve in this life, do we? She carefully folded the letter. I should prepare to leave. The stage passes through the trading post in 3 days. The prospect of Lily's departure hit Finn with unexpected force. The cabin, which had seemed perfectly adequate before her arrival, now felt empty at the mere thought of her absence. The life he had built, once a source of quiet pride, suddenly seemed hollow and incomplete. You don't have to go, he said before he could stop himself. Lily looked up, startled. What? Finn hesitated, suddenly aware of how his words might be interpreted. I mean, there's no rush. You could stay longer, think about your options. What options, Finn? Her voice was gentle but direct. I have no family besides this aunt, no fortune, no training for respectable employment. You could stay here, he blurted out, then immediately wished he could take back the words. They revealed too much exposed vulnerabilities he had guarded carefully. Lily's eyes widened. Here, as what? The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications. Finn knew what the proper answer should be, as his wife. But how could he propose marriage when he couldn't give her the family she deserved? What kind of man would ask a woman to bind herself to such a future? As my housekeeper, he said finally, the words tasting like ashes in his mouth. I could pay you fair wages, more than your aunt offers. The cabin needs a woman's touch, and he faltered, then finished lamely, I could use the help. Lily's expression was impossible to read. For a long moment she said nothing, studying his face as though searching for something hidden beneath his words. That's very kind, she said finally, her voice carefully neutral, but I don't think that would be wise. People would talk. People always talk, Finn countered. We're 20 miles from the nearest settlement, who's to know or care? I would know, Lily said softly, and so would you. The truth of her words silenced him. Of course, she was right. A young, unmarried woman living in a remote cabin with a bachelor, regardless of the arrangement's innocence, would be compromised in the eyes of society. More than that, it would be a constant temptation, a daily reminder of what they could not have. I appreciate the offer, Lily continued when he didn't respond. Truly, I do, but I think it's best if I go to Silver Creek as planned. Finn nodded stiffly, disappointment and relief warring within him. Disappointment that she would leave, relief that she had saved him from his own recklessness. What had he been thinking? That they could exist in some perpetual limbo, neither family nor strangers. Of course, he said, turning away to hide the emotion he feared might show on his face. I'll take you to the trading post on Thursday. The next 2 days passed in strained silence. Lily packed her few possessions, the dress she had made, some small items recovered from the river, the comb Finn had carved for her from a piece of antler. Finn busied himself with ranch work, staying out from dawn until dusk, avoiding the cabin and the reminder of how empty it would soon become. On the morning they were to leave for the trading post, Finn rose before dawn as usual. He had slept poorly, his dreams troubled by images of Lily departing, of returning to the solitude he had once embraced but now dreaded. As he stepped outside to begin his chores, he noticed the change in the air immediately, the heaviness, the metallic scent that heralded a spring storm. Sure enough, by mid-morning, dark clouds had gathered over the western peaks, and the wind had risen to a steady howl. Finn returned to the cabin to find Lily at the window, watching the approaching storm with concern. We should delay our departure, he said, removing his hat. This looks to be a bad one. Lily turned, her face drawn with worry. But the stage won't run in weather like this anyway, Finn finished. It's too dangerous. We'll go tomorrow or the next day if necessary. As if to emphasize his point, lightning split the sky, followed almost immediately by a deafening crack of thunder. Moments later, rain began to pound against the cabin roof, so heavy it sounded like hail. I guess that settles it, Lily said with a forced smile. One more day. The storm raged throughout the afternoon and into the evening, transforming the yard into a muddy quagmire and the nearby creek into a roaring torrent. Finn checked on the livestock, securing what he could against the wind and rain, while Lily prepared a hearty stew from their dwindling supplies. They ate in relative silence, the storm providing a convenient background that made conversation unnecessary. Yet Finn found himself stealing glances at Lily across the table, memorizing the way the lamplight caught in her dark hair, the graceful movement of her hands, the curve of her neck as she bent to her bowl. After dinner, with the wind howling outside and rain still drumming against the roof, they sat before the fire. The tension between them had grown nearly unbearable, filled with all the things unsaid, the possibilities unexplored. Finn, Lily said suddenly, breaking the silence, may I ask you something personal? He nodded, wary but curious. Why do you really live alone out here? Is it truly by choice? The question caught him off guard with its directness. Finn stared into the fire, considering his answer. He could give her the simple explanation that he preferred solitude, that the war had left him ill-suited for company, but after all they had shared, didn't she deserve the truth? Partly by choice, he said finally, partly by necessity. Lily's gaze was steady, patient. She waited for him to continue. Last year I contracted typhoid fever, Finn said, the words coming slowly, painfully. I nearly died. When I recovered, the doctor told me. He hesitated, then forced himself to continue. He told me the fever had left me sterile, that I could never father children. The admission hung in the air between them. Finn kept his eyes fixed on the fire, unable to look at Lily to see the pity or revulsion he expected to find in her expression. I see, she said softly, and you believe this makes you unfit for marriage. What woman would want a man who can't give her children? The bitterness in his voice surprised even him. What's the point of building all this, he gestured around the cabin, if there's no one to leave it to? Is that the only reason to build something? To have someone to leave it to? Finn looked up, startled by the challenge in her tone. Lily's eyes were not filled with pity as he had feared, but with something else entirely, a fierce intensity that caught him off guard. What about building something to share while you're alive? She continued. What about creating a home, a life with someone she faltered briefly, with someone you care for? It would be selfish, Finn argued. To ask a woman to give up the chance for children. Shouldn't that be her choice to make? Lily countered. Not every woman measures her worth by the children she bears, Finn. Some might value companionship, partnership, love above all else. The word love hung between them, electric in the firelit air. Finn found himself speechless, his carefully constructed justifications for solitude crumbling beneath the weight of her logic, her passionate defense of possibilities he had never allowed himself to consider. I never thought of it that way, he admitted finally. Perhaps you should, Lily said softly, rising from her chair. She moved to stand before him, her eyes reflecting the dancing flames. Perhaps you should consider that some women might choose a life with you, knowing all the facts, and find it more than enough. Finn stood slowly, drawn upward by some invisible force. They were standing close now, close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her green eyes, could smell the faint lavender scent of her hair. Lily, he began, uncertain what he meant to say, knowing only that something momentous was happening, something that could change everything. Outside, lightning cracked again, followed by a thunderous boom that shook the cabin. The lantern on the table flickered and died, leaving only the firelight to illuminate their faces. I should check that the roof isn't leaking, Finn said, the mundane words at odds with the intensity of the moment. Lily nodded, stepping back, and I should prepare for bed. They moved apart, the spell broken but not forgotten. As Finn checked the cabin for leaks, his mind raced with Lily's words, with the possibilities she had opened before him. Could it be true? Could Lily choose a life with him, knowing he could never father children? The thought was too dangerous, too hopeful. Better to focus on practicalities, on getting her safely to Silver Creek tomorrow or the next day, on returning to the life he had built, the life he understood. Yet as he lay awake that night, listening to the storm gradually subside and Lily's soft breathing from across the room, Finn found himself imagining a different future than the one he had resigned himself to. A future with Lily by his side, sharing this cabin, this land, this life. It was a beautiful, painful dream, and like most dreams, he told himself it would fade with the morning light. Dawn broke clear and bright, the storm having spent its fury during the night. Finn rose early as usual, but as he stepped outside, he immediately knew something was wrong. The air was filled with the rushing sound of water, not the gentle murmur of the creek, but a roaring torrent. He hurried to the rise behind the cabin and stopped short at what he saw. The creek had overflowed its banks dramatically, transforming the narrow valley below into a churning lake. The trail to the trading post, their route out, was completely submerged beneath several feet of fast-moving water. Finn returned to the cabin to find Lily already dressed, her small bundle of possessions ready by the door. "We have a problem," he said without preamble. "The storm caused flash flooding. The trail to the trading post is underwater." Lily's face fell. For how long? Hard to say, a day or two at least, maybe more depending on how much rain fell in the high country. Finn ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "I'm sorry, Lily, we're stranded here until the waters recede." She nodded slowly, absorbing this news. "Well, there's nothing to be done about it, I suppose. Nature has its own plans." "We should check our supplies," Finn said, grateful for her practical acceptance. "Make sure we have enough to last until we can get out." The day passed in a strange limbo. They were both acutely aware that Lily should have been on her way to Silver Creek, that every hour delayed was an hour stolen from the future they had planned. Yet there was also an unacknowledged relief in the postponement, in having more time together before their inevitable parting. They worked side by side, taking inventory of their supplies, preparing for the isolation that the flood might enforce. There was enough flour, coffee, and salt pork to last a week or more, and Finn's hunting skills could supplement their stores if necessary. In the afternoon, they climbed to a higher ridge to survey the extent of the flooding. The valley below resembled a vast, muddy lake, with only the tops of the tallest trees protruding from the waters. The sight was both awesome and terrifying, a reminder of nature's indifferent power. "I've never seen anything like it," Lily murmured, shading her eyes against the bright sun. "Spring floods happen every year, but this is exceptional," Finn agreed. The combination of early snowmelt and the heavy rain from the storm. His voice trailed off as he noticed something moving on the far side of the flooded valley, figures on horseback, 3 or 4 of them, making their way along the higher ground. "Riders," he said, pointing. Lily squinted in the direction he indicated. Who would be out in these conditions? Finn frowned, a prickle of unease running down his spine. "No one with good intentions," he said grimly. "The only route open now is the high trail, and only outlaws and Indians use that." "Could they be heading this way?" Lily asked, her voice tight with concern. "Possibly. The ranch is the only settlement for miles." Finn studied the distant riders for another moment before turning away. "Come on, let's get back to the cabin." As they descended, Finn's mind raced with calculations. The riders were still several hours away if they were indeed heading toward the ranch. There was time to prepare, but for what? If they were simply travelers caught by the flood, they might seek shelter for the night. If they were something worse. Finn. "What are you thinking?" Lily asked as they neared the cabin. He glanced at her, noting the worry in her green eyes. "Just being cautious. Isolated homesteads can be targets for desperate men, especially after natural disasters when help is hard to come by." "You think they might be dangerous?" "I think it's best to be prepared either way," Finn replied, his tone deliberately neutral to avoid alarming her further. Back at the cabin, Finn moved with quiet efficiency, checking his rifle and pistol, moving valuables out of sight, preparing for potential trouble while hoping it would not come. Lily watched him with growing concern. "What should I do?" she asked finally. Finn paused, considering. "If trouble comes, I want you to hide in the root cellar. There's a trapdoor under the rug by the pantry." "I won't hide while you face danger alone," Lily said firmly. "I can handle a gun. Father taught me after Mother died." Finn looked at her in surprise, reassessing. The quiet, dignified woman he had come to know these past weeks clearly had depths he had not fully appreciated. "Can you now?" he asked, a grudging respect in his voice. "I'm no sharpshooter, but I can hit what I aim at," Lily replied with simple confidence. Finn nodded slowly. "All right, but let's hope it doesn't come to that." As dusk approached, Finn kept watch from the cabin window, scanning the ridge line for any sign of the riders. The sun was sinking behind the western peaks, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks when he finally spotted them, 4 men on horseback, moving deliberately toward the cabin. "They're coming," he said quietly to Lily, who was preparing their evening meal. 4 of them. She wiped her hands on her apron, her face calm though Finn could see the tension in her shoulders. "What do we do?" "We wait. See what they want." Finn checked his pistol one final time before tucking it into his belt at the small of his back, hidden but accessible. "Stay inside, away from the windows." He stepped onto the porch as the riders approached, making sure his rifle was visible but not directly threatening. The 4 men reined in their horses at a respectful distance, taking measure of Finn and the cabin. Their leader, a broad-shouldered man with a weather-beaten face and calculating eyes, nudged his horse forward a few steps. "Evening," he called. "Hope we're not intruding." "Depends on your business," Finn replied evenly. The man chuckled, though there was little humor in the sound. "Direct, ain't you? Name's Curtis. These are my associates. We're just passing through, got caught by the flood. Looking for shelter for the night, if you can spare it." Finn studied the 4 men carefully. They were rough-looking, armed, and had the hard eyes of men accustomed to violence. Curtis might be telling the truth about being caught by the flood, but Finn doubted they were simply passing through. Few honest men used the high trail. Still, frontier hospitality had its codes, and turning away travelers in need could be dangerous in its own right. "I can offer you the barn," Finn said after a moment. "Cabin's too small for all of us." Curtis's eyes narrowed slightly, flicking to the cabin window where a lamp burned. Mighty inhospitable friend, especially since I see you've got a woman in there. He gestured to the wisp of smoke from the cooking fire. Smells like she's fixing supper, too. A chill ran down Finn's spine at the man's mention of Lily. My wife's not feeling well, he lied smoothly. Best she's not disturbed. Something shifted in Curtis's expression, a calculating look that Finn didn't like at all. Your wife, huh? Funny, word at the trading post was that Finn Weston was a confirmed bachelor. The implication was clear, they had been asking about him, gathering information. These were not random travelers. Things change, Finn said coldly. Now you're welcome to the barn for the night. There's clean straw and shelter from the elements, or you can move on, your choice. For a tense moment, Curtis seemed to consider pushing the issue. Then he shrugged, a too casual gesture that didn't match the hardness in his eyes. The barn will do, he said. We're obliged for the hospitality. As the four men dismounted and led their horses toward the barn, Finn remained on the porch, watching. Only when they had disappeared inside did he return to the cabin, locking the door behind him. Lily stood by the fire, her face pale but composed. What did they want? She asked quietly. Shelter for the night, they claim. Finn moved to the window, peering out toward the barn, but they knew my name, asked about me at the trading post. Outlaws. Lily's voice was steady, betraying only a hint of fear. Most likely, Finn turned to face her. They think you're my wife. I thought it's safer than explaining you're a woman alone. A faint blush touched Lily's cheeks, but she nodded in understanding. What now? Now we wait, keep watch through the night. Finn ran a hand through his hair, thinking quickly. They're probably just looking to rest their horses, maybe steal supplies. But if they try anything... We'll be ready, Lily finished for him, her green eyes meeting his with quiet determination. Finn felt a surge of admiration for her courage. Most women would be hysterical at the prospect of outlaws so close, but Lily faced the danger with the same dignity and strength she had shown since the moment he pulled her from the river. Yes, he agreed softly. We will. They ate their dinner in tense silence, Finn's attention divided between Lily and the window that offered a view of the barn. Outside, darkness had fallen completely, the only light coming from a small lantern the men had lit in the barn. You should try to rest, Finn said as they finished their meal. I'll keep first watch. Lily shook her head. I couldn't sleep anyway. She paused, then asked hesitantly, Finn, who do you think they are? What do they want? He considered the question, choosing his words carefully. Hard to say for certain. Could be they're running from the law, using the high trail to avoid towns. Could be they heard there was a man living alone out here with supplies worth taking. Or a woman worth taking, Lily said quietly, voicing the fear Finn had left unspoken. He met her eyes, unable to deny the possibility. That's why I said you were my wife. Most men, even outlaws, think twice before interfering with another man's woman. Most men's, Lily repeated, but not all. No, Finn agreed grimly. Not all. The hours crept by with excruciating slowness. Lily finally dozed in the chair by the fire, while Finn maintained his vigil at the window. The light in the barn had gone out, but he didn't trust the quiet. Men like Curtis didn't simply accept being relegated to the barn when there was a warm cabin and a woman nearby. His suspicions were confirmed shortly after midnight when he spotted movement outside, dark figures creeping from the barn toward the cabin. Finn reached over and gently shook Lily awake. They're coming, he whispered. 4 of them. Take the pistol and position yourself by the bedroom door. If they get past me, don't hesitate. Lily's eyes widened, but she took the offered weapon with steady hands and moved silently to the position he indicated. Finn checked his rifle one final time before taking up position beside the main door, hidden from immediate view but with clear lines of sight to both entrance points. The cabin fell silent except for the soft crackling of the dying fire. Outside, the footsteps grew closer, voices murmuring too low to make out the words. Then came the expected knock at the door. Weston, Curtis's voice called. Got a problem out here, need your help. Finn remained silent, rifle ready. The outlaws would have to do better than that. Another knock, harder this time. Weston, your barn's on fire. A clumsy lie, Finn could see the dark shape of the intact barn from his window. He still said nothing. There was a moment of silence, then the sound of hushed conversation outside. Finn tensed, knowing what would come next. He wasn't disappointed. The door shuddered as something heavy slammed against it, a shoulder or a boot. The solid oak held, but the hinges creaked ominously. "I know you're in there, Weston," Curtis shouted, abandoning all pretense. "We don't want to hurt you, just send out the woman and we'll be on our way." Finn's grip tightened on his rifle. "You're making a mistake, Curtis," he called back. "Ride away now and we can forget this happened." A harsh laugh answered him. "4 against 1 and you think we're making a mistake. Be reasonable, man, we're taking the woman either way. Question is whether you want to die for her." Finn glanced across the cabin to where Lily stood in the shadows, the pistol steady in her hands. Their eyes met, and in that moment something passed between them, an understanding, a resolution. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. "Last warning," Finn called. "Ride away or this ends badly for you." The only response was another powerful blow to the door, the wood splintering around the lock. One more hit like that and it would give way entirely. Finn raised his rifle, aiming at the door. The next blow came as expected, the door crashing open to reveal Curtis and another man in the doorway. "That's far enough," Finn said coldly. Curtis froze, taking in the rifle pointed at his chest. A slow smile spread across his face. "You can't get all 4 of us, Weston, and my boys outside have your windows covered." As if to emphasize his point, a muffled shout came from the back of the cabin, followed by the sound of breaking glass. The distraction was momentary, but enough. Curtis lunged forward, knocking the rifle barrel aside as the second man drew his pistol. Finn's rifle discharged into the wall as he grappled with Curtis, the 2 men crashing into the table and sending it toppling. From the bedroom area came the sharp crack of Lily's pistol, followed by a cry of pain from outside. The second outlaw raised his weapon toward Finn, but before he could fire, Lily's voice rang out clear and steady. "Drop it or you're dead." The man turned to find Lily standing with the pistol aimed directly at his heart, her eyes hard as flint. For a moment, indecision warred on his face, then his gun clattered to the floor. Finn, meanwhile, had managed to land a solid blow to Curtis's jaw, momentarily stunning the larger man. He wrenched free, reaching for his fallen rifle, but Curtis recovered quickly, tackling him before his fingers could close around the weapon. They rolled across the floor, trading blows, neither able to gain a decisive advantage. Curtis was heavier, stronger, but Finn fought with the desperate knowledge that Lily's safety hung in the balance. Outside, shouts and another gunshot indicated that the remaining outlaws were still trying to gain entry. The man Lily had at gunpoint was edging toward his fallen weapon, clearly calculating his chances. "Don't even think about it," Lily warned, her voice remarkably steady despite the chaos. Finn managed to land a solid blow to Curtis's ribs, gaining a moment's breathing room. He scrambled back, reaching not for his rifle, but for the iron poker leaning against the fireplace. As Curtis lunged at him again, Finn swung the poker with all his might, connecting with the outlaw's temple with a sickening crack. Curtis dropped like a stone, unconscious or worse. Breathing heavily, Finn retrieved his rifle and turned to find Lily still holding the second outlaw at bay, her pistol unwavering despite the tremor that had begun in her shoulders. "Get his gun," she said, nodding toward the weapon on the floor. Finn quickly secured the pistol, then moved to the window to assess the situation outside. One man lay crumpled by the back window. Lily's shot had found its mark. The fourth was nowhere to be seen, but hoof beats in the distance suggested he had decided to cut his losses and flee. "I think the last one's running," Finn said, turning back to Lily. "You all right?" She nodded, the pistol finally lowering as the immediate danger passed. "Yes, I shot someone." "You saved us," Finn corrected gently. He moved to the remaining outlaw who stood frozen with his hands raised. "As for you, you've got a choice. Join your friend out back, or help me tie up Curtis here and spend the night in my cellar until I can get you to the law." The man, younger than Curtis and clearly frightened now that the odds had turned, chose the cellar. It was nearly dawn by the time Finn had secured both prisoners, Curtis in the root cellar, still unconscious but alive, and the younger outlaw, who identified himself only as Jenkins, tied firmly to a support post in the barn. The body of the third man, whom Lily's shot had caught in the throat, was covered with a tarpaulin behind the cabin, awaiting proper burial when time permitted. Finn returned to the cabin to find Lily sitting at the righted table, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee, her face pale but composed. He poured himself a cup and sat across from her, suddenly aware of the cuts on his knuckles, the bruise forming on his jaw. "It's over," he said simply. "We're safe." Lily nodded, her eyes meeting his. "You fought for me," she said softly. "You could have died." "You fought too," Finn pointed out. That was a clean shot through the window. Not many men could have made it in those conditions, let alone, he stopped himself. Let alone a woman, Lily finished, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. I was going to say someone with little practice, Finn corrected, though they both knew he hadn't been. You're full of surprises, Lily Vance. As are you, Finn Weston, her gaze grew serious. When Curtis said he was taking me, the look in your eyes, I've never seen such certainty, such determination. Finn looked down at his coffee, unsure how to respond. The fear he had felt at the thought of Lily in those men's hands had been unlike anything he'd experienced before, worse than battlefield terror, more primal than facing his own mortality. I couldn't let them take you, he said finally, his voice rough with emotion. I would have died first. Why? The question was simple, direct, cutting through all pretense. Finn raised his eyes to meet hers. The moment stretched between them, filled with all the unspoken truths of the past weeks. Outside, the first light of dawn was breaking, painting the eastern sky in pale gold and rose. Because I love you, he said simply. Because somewhere between pulling you from that river and fighting for your life tonight, you became the most important thing in my world. The words, once spoken, seemed to hang in the air between them. Finn felt suddenly vulnerable, exposed in a way no physical danger could achieve. He had given voice to feelings he had barely admitted to himself, and now there was no taking them back. Lily's green eyes widened, filling with an emotion Finn couldn't quite identify. She set her coffee cup down with deliberate care. Even knowing you can never give me children, she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Even knowing I might want them someday. Even then, Finn confirmed, his heart pounding painfully in his chest, though I have no right to ask it of you. Lily rose from her chair and moved around the table to stand before him. In the soft light of dawn, she looked impossibly beautiful despite the ordeal of the night, her dark hair falling loose around her shoulders, her green eyes clear and direct. What if I told you, she said slowly, that I care more for the man himself than for the children he might give me? That I've watched you these past weeks, your kindness, your strength, your quiet dignity, and found something I never expected to find on this mountain. Finn stood, hardly daring to hope. What would that be? Home, Lily said simply, not a place but a feeling, safety, belonging, purpose. She reached up to touch his bruised jaw with gentle fingers. Love. The word sent a jolt through Finn's body. Lily, he breathed, his voice rough with emotion. I can't ask you to give up the chance for a family. It wouldn't be fair. You're not asking, she countered. I'm choosing, and Finn, family is more than blood relations. It's people who stand together, who fight for each other, who build something meaningful together. Her eyes held his steadily. Last night proved that to me beyond any doubt. Finn covered her hand with his own, turning his face to press a kiss against her palm. Are you certain? He asked, needing to be sure. This life is hard, isolated, and people will talk when they learn you chose a man who can't father children. Let them talk, Lily said with unexpected fierceness. What do they know of what makes a marriage, a home, a life? Her expression softened. Besides, who says family can only come one way? There are children who need homes, who have lost parents as I lost mine. The possibility struck Finn with surprising force. He had been so fixated on his inability to father biological children that he had never considered alternatives. Yet Lily was right, there were always orphans in need, especially in these harsh frontier territories. You would consider that, he asked, taking in children not our own. I would consider building a life with the man I love in whatever form that life takes, Lily replied. Though perhaps, she added with a small smile, we should start with a proper courtship before planning our family. Finn couldn't help but laugh, relief and joy bubbling up within him. I think we're well beyond the beginning of courtship, Lily Vance. I've seen you face down outlaws in your nightgown. A blush colored her cheeks, but her smile only widened. Then perhaps we should move on to the next step. Which is? Finn asked, his heart pounding as he drew her closer. This, Lily whispered, rising on tiptoe to press her lips against his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, then deepening as Finn wrapped his arms around her slender frame, drawing her against him as though he might never let go. All the tension, fear, and unspoken longing of the past week seemed to dissolve in that embrace, replaced by a certainty neither had dared acknowledge until now. When they finally parted, both breathless, the sun had risen fully above the eastern mountains, bathing the cabin in golden light. Outside, the flooded valley glittered like a vast lake, but the waters had already begun to recede, promising that soon paths would reopen, choices would need to be made. "What happens now?" Lily asked, her head resting against Finn's chest, his heartbeat strong beneath her ear. "First, we get our prisoners to the law in Silver Creek once the waters recede," Finn said practically. "Then," he paused, tilting her chin up to meet her eyes, "then I court you properly with your aunt's permission if necessary. And when you're ready, if you're ready, I ask you to be my wife." "And if I'm ready now?" Lily asked, her green eyes luminous in the morning light. Finn smiled, a full, unguarded smile that transformed his usually serious face. "Then I'd say we've already faced more together than most couples face in a lifetime. But some things shouldn't be rushed, even in the wilderness." Lily laughed softly, the sound filling the cabin with a warmth that had nothing to do with the morning sun. "Very well, Mr. Weston, court me properly. I shall endeavor to be suitably impressed by your efforts." "I'll hold you to that, Miss Vance," Finn replied, pressing another kiss to her forehead. "I'll hold you to that." The following month passed in a whirlwind of activity and emotion. Once the floodwaters receded enough to make travel possible, Finn and Lily had transported their prisoners to Silver Creek, where Curtis and Jenkins were taken into custody by the local sheriff. The story of how Finn and Lily had fought off the outlaws spread quickly through the small mining town, earning them a certain notoriety that Finn found uncomfortable, but Lily handled with characteristic grace. Their arrival in town also necessitated a meeting with Lily's aunt, Margaret Thornton, a stern-faced widow who ran a millinery shop on the town's main street. The woman had been coldly polite to her niece, but had thawed considerably when she learned of Finn's interest in courting Lily properly. "At least you're not trying to live in sin, as half the town already believes," Margaret had sniffed, eyeing the couple with shrewd assessment. "The girl can stay with me while you court her, Mr. Weston. I'll not have her reputation further compromised." And so Lily had remained in Silver Creek while Finn returned to his ranch, making the journey to town twice a week to call on her. These visits became the highlight of his existence, though the parting afterward grew increasingly difficult. They would walk along the streets of the growing mining town, take tea in the hotel restaurant, attend church services together on Sundays. Occasionally, when Margaret could be persuaded to act as chaperone, they would ride into the countryside for picnics, rediscovering the easy companionship they had shared at the cabin, but now colored by acknowledged feelings and careful touches. Throughout this proper courtship, Finn found himself falling ever deeper in love with Lily. Her quiet strength, her thoughtful nature, her ability to find joy in simple pleasures, all these qualities that had first drawn him now bound him to her with unbreakable ties. For her part, Lily bloomed under Finn's attentions. The grief that had shadowed her eyes when he first pulled her from the river gradually faded, replaced by a steady happiness that transformed her natural beauty into something luminous. Even Margaret, initially suspicious of the mountain man who had spent weeks alone with her niece, gradually warmed to Finn. His obvious devotion to Lily, coupled with his respectful adherence to propriety during their courtship, eventually won the older woman's grudging approval. "He's a good man," Margaret admitted to Lily one evening as they closed the shop. "Not what I would have chosen for you, perhaps, but solid, dependable." "He's everything to me," Lily replied simply, her hands busy with the day's receipts. Margaret studied her niece with shrewd eyes. "You know what they're saying, about him not being able to father children." Lily's hands stilled, her gaze lifting to meet her aunt's directly. "Yes, I know. He told me himself before anything was between us. And that doesn't trouble you. Most women want a family, especially out here where children are an extra pair of hands, not just mouths to feed." "There are many ways to make a family," Lily said quietly. "And many children who need homes." Margaret's expression softened slightly. "You sound like your mother. She always did see things differently than most." She paused, then added gruffly, "Your parents would be proud of the woman you've become." The words, coming from the usually stern Margaret, brought unexpected tears to Lily's eyes. "Thank you, Aunt Margaret, that means more than I can say." 2 days later, on a crisp autumn afternoon 6 weeks after he had first pulled her from the raging river, Finn formally proposed to Lily. He had taken her riding to a beautiful overlook above Silver Creek, where the valley spread out before them in a tapestry of gold and russet as the trees turned with the season. There, with the mountains standing witness, he had knelt before her and offered not just a simple gold band, all he could afford, but his heart, his name, and his solemn promise to build a life with her, whatever form that life might take. "Lily Vance," he said, his voice steady despite the pounding of his heart, "these past weeks have shown me a future I never thought possible. You've given me hope, purpose, joy. Will you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" Lily's eyes had filled with tears as she extended her trembling hand. "Yes, Finn Weston," she whispered, "with all my heart, yes." They were married 2 weeks later in Silver Creek's small church, with Margaret Vance and several of Finn's rancher neighbors as witnesses. Lily wore a simple white dress she had sewn herself, with sprigs of late-blooming wildflowers in her dark hair. Finn, in his best shirt and newly purchased suit, waited for her at the altar with an expression of such naked adoration that several of the women in attendance were moved to tears. The ceremony was brief but deeply meaningful, the couple's quiet joy palpable to all who witnessed their union. Afterward, there was a modest celebration at Margaret's home, where the usually reserved woman surprised everyone by producing a feast worthy of the occasion. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the town, Finn and Lily prepared to depart for the ranch that would now be their shared home. Margaret, in an unexpected display of emotion, embraced her niece tightly. "Your mother would be so happy," she murmured. "She always said you would find your own path in your own time." "Thank you for everything, Aunt Margaret," Lily replied, returning the embrace with equal feeling. "You'll visit us soon." "Once you're settled," Margaret agreed, then turned to Finn with uncharacteristic warmth. "Take care of her, Mr. Weston. She's the only family I have left." "With my life," Finn promised solemnly, extending his hand to the older woman who clasped it firmly. As they rode away from Silver Creek, Lily beside him on her own horse, Finn felt a sense of completion unlike anything he had known before. The future stretched before them, not empty and lonely as he had once feared, but rich with possibility, with shared dreams and mutual purpose. The cabin, when they reached it just as darkness was falling, seemed to welcome them home. Finn had spent the days before their wedding making improvements, building new furniture, adding shelves and cupboards, even constructing a small front garden that Lily could plant come spring. Before Lily could dismount, Finn was beside her, lifting her from the saddle with gentle strength. "Welcome home, Mrs. Weston," he said softly, his eyes reflecting the first stars appearing in the darkening sky. Lily's arms went around his neck as he carried her toward the cabin. "Home," she repeated, the word filled with promise. "Our home." That night, as husband and wife, they discovered each other with tender passion, the physical expression of a love that had grown from crisis to companionship to deep, abiding commitment. In Lily's arms, Finn found a healing he had never thought possible, for the wounds of war, for the loneliness of his isolation, for the grief of his perceived inadequacy. And in Finn's embrace, Lily found the safety and belonging she had feared lost forever when the river had claimed her father. They had both been adrift, and in finding each other they had found shore. The seasons turned, autumn giving way to winter, the mountain landscape transformed by blankets of pristine snow. The cabin, once a place of solitary existence, became truly a home, filled with conversation, with shared meals, with plans for the future, with love freely given and received. Finn's small cattle operation prospered under their combined efforts, and Lily established a thriving garden when spring returned, even beginning to sell her preserves and baked goods to passing travelers and at the trading post. They spoke often of their desire to open their home to children who needed one, but agreed to wait until they were more established, more financially secure. In the meantime, they built their marriage on a foundation of mutual respect, shared labor, and deep affection that only grew stronger with each passing day. Their first anniversary found them more in love than ever, their life together settling into rhythms that felt both new and somehow ancient, as though they had always been meant to find each other on that flood-swollen river. It was shortly after this milestone that Lily began to feel strangely unwell. At first, she dismissed it as a passing illness, unexpected fatigue, nausea in the mornings, a peculiar sensitivity to smells. But as the symptoms persisted, a suspicion began to form in her mind, one so impossible, so miraculous that she hardly dared give it voice. After 3 weeks of uncertainty, Lily made the journey to Silver Creek alone while Finn was occupied with a cattle drive to a neighboring ranch. There she visited the town's doctor, a kindly older man who had treated her once before for a minor illness. The examination was thorough, the doctor's questions precise and professional. When he had finished, he sat back in his chair and regarded Lily with an expression that mixed professional satisfaction with genuine pleasure. "Mrs. Weston," he said gently, "I believe congratulations are in order." "You're expecting a child." Lily stared at him, her heart seeming to stop in her chest. "That's not possible," she whispered. "My husband, the fever," he was told. Medicine is not an exact science, the doctor replied with a small smile. And nature has a way of surprising us all, but I assure you the signs are unmistakable. I would estimate you're about 2 months along. Tears filled Lily's eyes, spilling over to trail down her cheeks. Are you certain? She asked, hardly daring to believe. As certain as I can be, the doctor confirmed. Of course, time will tell definitively, but I've delivered enough babies in my career to recognize the signs. Lily rode home in a state of dazed wonder, her mind racing with how to share this miraculous news with Finn. He had accepted his sterility with stoic resignation, had built a life and future that didn't depend on biological children. How would he react to this impossible, wonderful development? When she arrived at the cabin, she found Finn already returned from the cattle drive, his face lighting up at the sight of her as it always did. He helped her from her horse, pressing a kiss to her forehead. I missed you, he said simply. The cabin feels empty without you now. Lily's heart swelled with love for this man, this strong, gentle, honorable man who had saved her from the river and then, in a different way, from loneliness and uncertainty. Finn, she said, taking his hands in hers, I have something to tell you, something wonderful but unexpected. His expression turned concerned. What is it? Are you all right? I'm more than all right, Lily assured him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. I went to see the doctor in Silver Creek today, about the tiredness, the nausea in the mornings. Finn's brow furrowed with worry. What did he say? Is it serious? Lily took a deep breath, squeezing his hands tightly. Finn, I'm with child, we're going to have a baby. The color drained from Finn's face, his blue eyes widening in shock. That's not possible, he whispered, echoing her own words to the doctor. The typhoid. The doctor said. Apparently doctors can be wrong, Lily said gently. Or perhaps it's a miracle, but it's true, Finn, we're going to have a child. For a long moment, Finn stood frozen, his expression a mixture of disbelief, hope, and fear. Then, with a sound that was half laugh, half sob, he gathered Lily into his arms, lifting her off her feet and spinning her in a circle of pure joy. A baby, he said when he finally set her down, his voice thick with emotion. Our baby. Lily nodded, her own cheeks wet with happy tears. Our family, Finn, the one neither of us thought we would have. That night, as they lay together in the bed they had shared for just over a year, Finn's hand rested protectively over Lily's still flat stomach. The wonder of it hadn't diminished. If anything, it had grown as the initial shock wore off, replaced by a cautious but deepening joy. I'm still having trouble believing it, Finn admitted quietly, his breath warm against Lily's neck. After accepting for so long that I could never. I know, Lily murmured, covering his hand with her own. But perhaps your body was healing all this time, growing stronger. She turned in his arms to face him, or perhaps some things are simply meant to be against all odds. Like us, Finn said softly, tracing the curve of her cheek with gentle fingers. Like a mountain man rescuing a drowning woman and finding his whole life changed. Like a grieving daughter losing everything, only to find everything she never knew she needed, Lily added, pressing a kiss to his palm. The months that followed were filled with preparations and anticipation. The small bedroom adjacent to theirs, which had been used for storage, was transformed into a nursery. Finn crafted a cradle from pine wood, carving delicate mountain scenes along its sides. Lily sewed tiny garments, each stitch an act of love for the child growing within her. As Lily's body changed, her slender frame expanding to accommodate the new life, Finn watched in awe and gratitude. He treated her with such tender consideration that she sometimes laughingly accused him of treating her like fine china. I'm pregnant, not made of glass, she would remind him when he insisted on taking over her more strenuous chores. Humor me, he would reply, pressing a kiss to her forehead. I'm still getting used to this miracle. Winter came again, blanketing the mountains in white silence. Lily's time grew near, and Finn arranged for a midwife from a nearby settlement to stay with them during the final weeks. The woman, Mrs. Hollis, was experienced and no-nonsense, her presence a comfort to both expectant parents as they faced the prospect of bringing a new life into the world. On a clear, cold morning in late January, just as dawn was breaking over the eastern peaks, Lily went into labor. The process was long and difficult, testing the limits of her strength and Finn's composure. He remained outside the bedroom as Mrs. Hollis had insisted, pacing the cabin floor, each of Lily's cries cutting him to the quick. As morning gave way to afternoon, and afternoon to evening, Finn's worry deepened. The labor was taking too long, Mrs. Holly's expression increasingly concerned as she emerged periodically for fresh water or clean linens. "Is she all right?" Finn asked for what felt like the 100th time as the midwife passed him again. "The baby." Mrs. Holly's paused, her weathered face softening slightly at the naked fear in his eyes. "Your wife is strong, Mr. Weston. And determined, but this is difficult. The baby." She hesitated, then continued, "There may be more than one." "More than one," Finn repeated, stunned. "Twins." "It seems likely," the midwife confirmed. "Which explains the size and the difficulty, but don't worry yourself yet. Many women safely deliver twins even out here." The implication that some did not was left unspoken, but it hung in the air like a storm cloud. Finn nodded stiffly, resuming his pacing with renewed anxiety. Another hour passed, then another. Lily's cries had grown weaker, which frightened Finn more than their earlier intensity. When Mrs. Holly's emerged again, her face was grave. "Mr. Weston," she said quietly, "I believe your wife would benefit from your presence now. She's tiring and there's still work to be done." Finn didn't need to be told twice. He moved past the midwife into the bedroom, his heart constricting at the sight that greeted him. Lily lay in their bed, her dark hair plastered to her forehead with sweat, her face pale with exhaustion. She turned at his entrance, her green eyes lighting with a weak but genuine smile. "Finn," she whispered. "I'm sorry it's taking so long." He was by her side in an instant, taking her hand and pressing it to his lips. "Don't apologize, you're doing something incredible." He brushed damp strands of hair from her face. "Mrs. Holly says there might be two babies, twins." Lily nodded weakly. "She told me, explains, why I've been so huge." Her attempt at humor was interrupted by another contraction, her face contorting with pain. "What can I do?" Finn asked desperately, looking to Mrs. Holly's, who had returned to her position at the foot of the bed. "Hold her hand, talk to her. Remind her why she's fighting so hard," the midwife instructed, her focus on her preparations. "We're getting close now." For the next hour, Finn did exactly that. He held Lily's hand through each contraction, murmured words of love and encouragement in her ear, wiped her brow with a cool cloth, and prayed as he had never prayed before, not for himself, but for his wife and the children struggling to enter the world. Just as the first stars were appearing in the night sky outside their window, the first baby arrived, a boy with a shock of dark hair and a lusty cry that filled the cabin. Mrs. Holly's quickly cleaned and swaddled him before placing him briefly in Finn's arms. "Hold your son while I help your wife deliver the second child," she instructed. Finn stared down at the tiny, perfect face in wonder, his son. His and Lily's son, the miracle he had never dared hope for. "He's beautiful," he whispered, showing the baby to Lily, who managed a tired smile before another contraction claimed her. The second birth came more quickly than the first, but it took a further toll on Lily's already exhausted body. When at last the second child emerged, another boy, slightly smaller than his brother but with the same dark hair, Lily was barely conscious. "Finn," she murmured as Mrs. Holly's cleaned and examined the second baby. "Are they all right?" "They're perfect," Finn assured her, his own eyes blurred with tears of joy and relief. "Both boys, both healthy and strong." A small smile touched Lily's pale lips before her eyes fluttered closed, her body finally surrendering to the exhaustion. For a terrifying moment, Finn thought she had slipped away from him. "Lily," he called, his voice breaking. "Lily." Mrs. Holly's moved quickly to Lily's side, checking her pulse and breathing. "She's just unconscious," she said after a moment. "Her body's been through an ordeal. She needs rest now more than anything." Finn nodded, relief washing over him. He looked down at the two swaddled infants now lying in the cradle he had built, one cradle that would now need to be two, and felt a surge of love and protectiveness unlike anything he had known before. "My sons," he whispered, "my family." Throughout the night, Finn alternated between tending to Lily and caring for the newborn twins under Mrs. Holly's guidance. Lily drifted in and out of consciousness, accepting sips of water and broth when awake, but mostly sleeping the deep sleep of utter exhaustion. By morning, her color had improved, and when she finally awakened properly, the first thing she asked for was to hold her sons. Finn carefully placed the twins in her arms, his heart nearly bursting at the sight of Lily, pale but radiant with motherly love, holding the children they had created together. "They're so beautiful," she whispered, studying their tiny faces. "I can hardly believe they're really here." "Believe it," Finn said, sitting beside her on the bed, his arm supporting her. "They're real and they're ours." As the winter sun streamed through the bedroom window, illuminating the new family in its golden light, Finn marveled at how completely his life had transformed. 2 years ago, he had been a solitary man resigned to a future without children, without family, without the kind of love he now experienced. He had believed himself broken, incomplete, unworthy of the very happiness he now possessed. "What shall we name them?" Lily asked, breaking into his thoughts. Finn considered, looking at the two identical faces. "What about Nathaniel for the firstborn, after your father?" Tears welled in Lily's eyes. "Yes," she said softly, "he would have been so proud, and for his brother." "Samuel," Finn suggested after a moment, "after my father." Two good, strong names for two strong boys. "Nathaniel and Samuel Weston," Lily tested the names, smiling her approval. "Perfect." Mrs. Hollis, who had been quietly observing from the doorway, stepped forward. "Those are fine names. Strong names for boys born in the wilderness." She began gathering her things, preparing to return to her own home now that the crisis had passed. "Take care of your wife, Mr. Weston. She'll need time to recover, especially having born twins." "I will," Finn promised, his eyes never leaving Lily and their sons, "with everything I am." In the days and weeks that followed, the cabin was transformed by the presence of the twins. Their cries, their needs, their small triumphs became the center around which Finn and Lily's world revolved. Sleepless nights and exhausting days were balanced by moments of such profound joy that neither parent would have traded them for anything. Word of the miracle twins spread through the scattered settlements, bringing visits from curious neighbors bearing gifts and good wishes. Even Margaret made the journey from Silver Creek, her usual stern demeanor softening at the sight of her grandnephews. "They have the Vance eyes," she observed, holding Samuel while Lily nursed Nathaniel. "Your mother would have been beside herself with joy." "I think of her often," Lily admitted, "especially now. There are so many questions I wish I could ask her." Margaret nodded, an uncharacteristic gentleness in her expression. "She would tell you to trust yourself. She always said you had good instincts." The older woman glanced toward Finn, who was preparing dinner across the cabin. "She would have approved of your choice, I think, despite everything." "Because of everything," Lily corrected softly, "Finn is the best man I've ever known." "You were right, you know," Margaret said after a moment. "About there being different ways to make a family. I didn't believe it when you said it, but looking at you all now." She shook her head slightly. "You've made something beautiful here against all odds." As spring returned to the mountains, bringing new growth and fresh beginnings, Finn and Lily settled into their expanded family life with deepening contentment. The twins, now 3 months old, were thriving, their identical faces beginning to show subtle differences as their personalities emerged. Nathaniel, the firstborn, was serious and observant, while Samuel was more vocal and demanding of attention. One evening, as the babies slept and Finn and Lily sat together on the porch watching the sunset paint the western peaks, Finn found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this point. "I still can't quite believe it sometimes," he admitted, his arm around Lily's shoulders. "A year and a half ago I was alone, convinced I would never have a family, and now," he shook his head in wonder. "And now you're surrounded by love," Lily finished for him, leaning into his embrace. "As am I. From the moment you pulled me from that river, everything changed. Even through the grief of losing father, I felt something begin to heal in me here with you." "The doctor in Denver was so certain," Finn said, still marveling at their miracle. "He said the fever had left me permanently sterile, that there was no hope." "Perhaps it wasn't as permanent as he thought," Lily suggested. "Or perhaps," she smiled up at him, "perhaps love is more powerful than medical certainty." Finn laughed softly, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I prefer that explanation myself." As twilight deepened around them, bringing with it the first stars of evening, a cry from inside the cabin signaled that one of the twins had awakened. Lily started to rise, but Finn gently held her back. "I'll go," he said, pressing another kiss to her forehead before standing. "You rest a bit longer." Inside, he found Nathaniel awake and fussing, while Samuel still slept peacefully. With practiced movements that would have astonished his former self, Finn lifted his son, cradling him against his chest as he moved back toward the porch. "There now," he murmured, the deep rumble of his voice soothing the baby. "Your papa's got you." As he stepped back outside, holding his son secure in the crook of his arm, Finn looked at Lily sitting in the gathering dusk, her face lifted to the emerging stars. Behind them, the cabin glowed with lamplight, a beacon of warmth and safety in the wilderness. Within it, Samuel slept in the cradle Finn had crafted with his own hands, surrounded by the home they had built together. And in that moment, Finn Weston, once a solitary, wounded soul who believed himself destined for a life without children, knew with absolute certainty that he had found what men spend lifetimes seeking. Not just a house or property to pass on, but a true legacy of love, one that would endure long after he was gone. "Look, Nathaniel," he said softly to his son as he rejoined Lily on the porch. "Look at this beautiful world that's waiting for you. Look at your mother, the bravest, kindest woman ever to walk these mountains." Lily smiled up at them, her green eyes luminous in the fading light. "And look at your father," she added, reaching up to take the baby's tiny hand, "the man who thought he would never have an heir and now has two. The man who saved me in every way a person can be saved." Together, the three of them watched as the last light faded from the western sky, the stars emerging in their countless thousands over the mountains that had brought them together, mountains that had once seemed sterile and unforgiving to a lonely man, but which now cradled the most precious gift he could ever have imagined. A family of his own.